after graduating, I went to this whole line of sales. I was a sales engineer for barcode scanners and printers. It was a Taiwanese company, so I spent a bit of time actually doing sales over there. And after that, I joined Shell, right? I was in Shell for about 7 years or so. So I started off with customer service, in charge of expatriate onboarding. So when expatriates come here, get them their phones, broadband, get them to their housing. That was my first role in Shell. Then after that, I went to supply chain, where I was doing global procurement for IT. So every year I handle about USD 40 million of worth of laptops and servers orders for Shell globally. After that, I moved on to finance, where I did commercial ERP, ERP softwares for 320 Shell companies around the world. This was a global project worth about USD 1.2 billion. So that's where I did finance. Then I moved on into the whole area of marketing. I was the country brand manager for Shell Raw 95, the main fuel that most of us pump. Yeah, and I was the brand custodian of that fuel. So I launched that fuel, and yeah, that was my last role with Shell. Before I moved on to a leadership development organization called Leaderonomics, I was a talent manager over there, running high potential programs where I deal with a lot of talent pools from many companies and manage the high potential programs across industries. Then after that, I became what I call a P&L leader. So I manage a profit and loss within Leaderonomics, and I was the head of a department, and we were the fastest growing and brought to profitability in 2 years. Then obviously, what was the next challenge? I started up a company called Think Codex that specializes in gamification, secured US and Dutch investors funding, and I have grown the company into a regional business, and that's where I am currently. So yeah, so if you notice, my journey has been very mixed, and what happens is that you can see that I've kind of spanned across very different types of areas. And the one thing interesting is that all these are within Shell and within the rest of the companies, all these are all promotions, and it was done at half the time, and these were not lateral transfers. So I'll be sharing a bit about my journey and what are some of the principles I used in order to be able to move on within the corporate world, and also personally as my growing as a leader as myself. Okay, now, so let's understand a bit about what leadership is, right? So the state of leadership globally, I think last year was, according to Forbes, companies spent about 366 billion USD for leadership development last year. And 95% of those companies say that they plan to increase or maintain those budgets, right? So if you can see, leadership development is a huge business, all right? It's very important for companies to spend that much of money globally, right? And that's where we are in terms of where leadership is. So obviously, what is leadership then, right? The next question. So John Maxwell, the management guru, says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But in the corporate world or in the professional world, it needs to be broken down, and people need to understand that leadership is not just influence. What does influence mean, right? And there are 4 areas that we work with our clients. So there are 4 dimensions essentially. So the first one is the leadership dimension. So what are the leadership styles? What are the leadership models out there, right? Second one is the business dimension. What are the business or functional skill sets do you have, right? Are you a marketing person? Are you a finance person? Are you a digital person? Are you a analytical person? So what business dimension or skill set do you have? The third one is a cognitive dimension, your thinking patterns or mindsets. Are you a lateral thinker? Are you a strategic thinker? Are you a creative thinker? Are you a design thinker? So those are the things that we look at in terms of cognitive dimension. The last but not least, the 4th dimension of leadership is what we call people dimension. So teams and leaders development. What type of a team leader or what type of a leader's leader are you in that sense? So these are the 4 dimensions that we usually look at when we deal with a lot of our clients in Malaysia and across the region. Okay. So now, that's a bit about leadership. What about gamification? So what is gamification, right? So gamification, a lot of us, when we think about gamification, we think about games itself, right? Now, that's partially true, but it's not all about that. Now, gamification is using what we call game psychology. So the things that make people addicted to games, the thing that makes people skip their lunch, skip their dinner, skip their sleep, right, to continue to play games. So that's what we call game psychology. And then you have game mechanics, those things that you play with. So as you can see in the picture, the Pac-Man, the dices, and those are what we call game mechanics. All right. So game psychology and game mechanics, the gamification is the discipline of using those elements and putting them in non-game environments. In this case, the real world. So I'm going to talk a bit more about gamification in leadership. So gamification actually is 80% what we call game psychology. So it deals with the whole area of motivational science, right? Social mechanics, right? How humans socialize with each other, player types. What are different types of gamers or player types of people you have when we play games? Behavioral economics, right? How do you predict people's behavior and how do you get people to behave the way you want them using certain triggers? Habit building models, right? Games have rightly or wrongly so have a bad rap of getting people addicted to games, right? So their habit building models essentially in gamification that we use as well. And of course, skill improvement, right? So how do you improve yourself as a gamer? But in the sense of leadership development, how do you improve yourself as a leader? Now, 20% of those you see are what we call game elements, game mechanics, game dynamics. So the cards, the board games, the computer screen, the mobile screen. So that is the 20%, right? So gamification is all about the psychological part of things. So now, obviously, when we talk about leadership and we talk about games, what do they have to do with each other, right? So I'm going to introduce to you something which we call a player journey map, all right? So what is a player journey map? So a player journey map is a map of a player's journey in a game, right? So essentially, there are four phases, right? So the first one is what we call discovery. And so what is discovery? Discovery is how the player discovers the game, right? Second part of the journey is what we call onboarding, which is how the player is onboarded to the game. The third phase is what we call scaffolding. Scaffolding, just like as a building is being built, you have scaffolding around it. So how the player builds his or her character inside the game, right? And last but not least, mastery. So how the player moves beyond the end of the game. So what if you finish with the game? What do you do, right? So these are the four phases, right? I'm going to use the same four phases to talk about leadership development. And remember, there are four dimensions to it: the leadership dimension, the business dimension, the cognitive dimension, and then the people dimension. Okay, so if we look at the leadership journey map from the point of view of, like, let's say climbing a mountain, leadership discovery and leadership onboarding is at the bottom, right? Is getting the basics right. Leadership scaffolding is actually building yourself as a leader, and leadership mastery is, of course, to a certain extent, what we describe as arriving as a leader, right? So let's talk about leadership discovery right now. When we talk about leadership discovery as the first part of it, when we talk about discovery from a player's perspective, right? Usually when a player wants to play a game, they'll ask themselves, what types of games are out there? Are there puzzles? Are there mystery games? Are there walking simulators? Are there first-person shooters? So they tend to ask themselves, what type of games are there, right? And second question they tend to ask themselves is, what games am I good at? I'm very terrible at puzzles, so I'm not going to look at puzzle games, right? But I'm very good at playing strategy games, Raid Alert, Command and Conquer, those type of things. And where can I find out more? Do I go to the Google App Store? Do I go to the Apple App Store and such? So these are the things that where you can find out more about games. Do I buy game magazines? Do I go online? Now, from a leadership perspective, when we talk about leadership discovery, it's the exact same thing that you need to do, right? So you need to understand, if you're going to go on this thing called the leadership journey, you need to understand what types of leadership models are out there, right? There's transformative leadership model, there's servant leadership model, right? There's extreme leadership model, there is situational leadership model. Now, if you don't know what type of models out there, you're going to find it very hard to determine what model you want to follow later on. So it's very important that you understand the leadership models. And you also need to understand yourself, not what games you're good at, but who am I as a person, right? This is what I'm good at, and this is what I can do. And I'm a person who likes to be out in the front, or I'm the person who likes to be back. I'm more of an analytical person. So you need to understand yourself. Who am I as a person? And obviously, where can I understand more about leadership, right? Through articles, through mentors, to watching organizations, through autobiographies. So that's where it is. Now, when we talk about leadership discovery, it's all the whole area of self-awareness. You need to understand who you are as a person and why you are going on this journey. So if you don't understand the why, then you're going to find that you're going to lose motivation along the way, because leadership is not an easy thing to go through, especially in the later stages, right? So the first stage of discovery is all about self-awareness. You want to understand who you are as a person and why you are going to this journey. And these two questions will help to guide you to the next phase, right? Which is what we call leadership onboarding. Now, leadership onboarding is the whole area. When we talk about a player being onboarded to a game, the first thing that they do is they'll look at, okay, what are elements in the games? Oh, this game has have guns, have tanks. This game have power-ups. These games have all these things. Then they'll ask themselves, okay, how do I create some of these moves? And usually there'll be a game tutorial. And they'll be playing, they'll be trying certain things. This is how they jump, this is how they shoot the thing, right? So how do I do some of these moves? So what are some of the stats of my character? So if the game has a game character, what's going to happen is that it's going to look, oh, there's this thing called strength. There's this thing called dexterity. There's this thing called endurance. They're all at different levels. And this is where I need to understand myself as a person, and also my game environment, right? Now, when we talk about a leader's perspective, once you have chosen a certain leadership domain you want to do, you go in. So let's say you want to choose servant leadership, right? You need to understand that domain better, right? What is servant leadership, and how do I learn some of the skills within servant leadership as per what you research might have found, right? Because you need to understand what are the skills that you're going to need for you to plot your way forward. And you want to assess who am I from a deeper perspective. So this whole stage of leadership onboarding is all about self and domain assessment. So you want to understand your strengths and also your gaps deeper, and what leadership environment you're in. Okay, so once you discover about yourself, you start to onboard yourself into this whole leadership domain, and you start to understand deeper what are your strengths and your gaps. So the next phase is what we call leadership scaffolding. Now, so usually the first two phases are shorter. This is the longest phase of all, right? These can take years, sometimes decades, depending on the level of leadership you want to go to, right? So leadership scaffolding is about the whole area of understanding how to build yourself as your leaders, all right? So from a player's perspective, in a game, you look for which characters that are going to help me. Now, whether the characters are from another person, or the characters are what we call NPCs, non-player characters. That means the characters are generated by the computer. You want to look at which characters are going to help you to solve that quest in the game or the adventure, right? And secondly is, now that you know your stats, how do I build my character? So in games, they have this thing called skill trees, right? So with the experience points that you have, you can add on to these skills, and there are certain pathways in the skill trees that you can go to. So you got to decide which type of skills you want to be highly good at, right? And so the other one is player would ask at this stage is, how do I get through some of these stages? Now, this is where you find that things are not going to be so easy. During the onboarding stage, usually the stages are very easy. It's very easy to win, but after this, the game stages become harder and harder, and that requires a lot of thinking, a lot of analyzing, and of course a lot of planning as well. Now, when we talk about leadership perspective, you want to ask yourself, who are the mentors? Who are the peers? Who are the leaders that can help me in my journey? All right. And don't be afraid to ask for some of these people to come alongside with you, because nothing beats experience in the sense of a leadership journey. Of course, you can journey it alone, but why journey it alone when you can journey together, right? And you want to ask yourself, how do I develop some of these leadership skills? Now, at this stage, you understand that not only do you need to have depth in certain skills, whether it's a business skills, whether it's a cognitive skills, whether it's people skills, you also need to develop a breadth of skills. And that's why also mentors would help you greatly, because you will not be able to learn all the skill sets at the same time. Because as you go up as a leader at the mastery level, where you sit on top of organizations in the professional world, you expected to know a lot of things like finance, marketing, HR, and a lot of other things, how to handle people, how to handle conflict, how to motivate, how to negotiate, how to influence. So those are all the things you need to do. So at this stage, you are trying to learn both breadth and also depth, and having a mentor would really help you in this journey. And of course, how do I get past personal or team obstacles? Often at this stage, you're no longer delivering through yourself, you're delivering through others. And this is where most of the problems occur, because unlike characters in games which are controlled by the computer, they don't do what you want. People in real life don't do what you want them to do. All right, so that's where the problem is. And so this stage, it's all about building your capacity. So how much you can take in, and capability, how much you can do. So one's about your skill capability, the other one is yours, how much you can absorb as a leader, right? So you want to utilize your strengths to get past obstacles and build your team and also yourself. So now let's come to the final part of it, right? The whole area of leadership mastery. So when we talk about leadership mastery from a player's perspective, players will often ask, so once they get very good at a game, they'll ask, am I the best that I can be? So they look at leaderboards. All right, in games you have leaderboards. Who are you, in Malaysia? What level, what numbering, what position are you in Malaysia? What position are you regionally? What position are you globally, right? And you often become a bit more obsessed about going up the rankings in that sense. And you also want to talk about how can I contribute back to the gamer community? So I've played this game, done and dusted, I've won, I've come to the end of it. Now what do I do to contribute back to the gamer community? From a leader's perspective, it's the whole area of how can I validate myself externally. Now with leadership, there's two types of value, what I call perceived value and actual value. Now, what is perceived value? Perceived value is the value that you have as a leader inside your organization, right? So means that you're getting paid this much, you're getting this amount of responsibilities, and you're getting this title. But if you were to put yourself out there in the industry or against the job market, right, you might often find that your value might be very different. It could be higher, but more often than not, it's usually lower, right? And you want to validate yourself externally. So as a leader, you don't just want to be a so-called high-ranking leader within your organization, because within an organization, it's very easy for you to be a high-ranking leader, and then people will continue to build you up. Because obviously, when you're a high-ranking leader within your organization, nobody's going to say bad things about you, right? Everybody's going to look up to you. But when you put yourself outside and validate yourself externally among your peers, among your industries, right, around NGOs, among educational institutions, then you find out what your true actual value is, right? So as a leader, when you're at this level, at the top of it, you need to validate yourself externally, right, to understand and see where your gaps are. And the last bit is a leader at this level needs to ask this question: who am I developing in my team to succeed me? Now, in corporate terms, this is called bench strength, right? They borrow the term from sports, right? On sports, you have a playing team, and then on the bench, you got reserve players, right? So in this case, in the corporate world as well, right? What I find often leaders at this level, they spend a lot of time planning for their ascent, all right, to go to the summit, but they spend very little time or very little effort on the descent, right? And your legacy as a leader at the top of this, when you're achieving mastery, it's going to be very much defined on the leaders that come after you. So we've seen a lot of great companies that fell because the leaders that came after the great leaders were very bad leaders, and to a certain extent, it is the fault of those of the leaders that came after these great leaders. But it is also the fault of the great leaders who never built the leaders beyond there. And I think, and from this whole area of leadership mastery, this area is all about creating significance, building others, and finding and creating a legacy for yourself. All right. So that's all I want to really share about leadership, given the 20 minutes that I have. If you want to connect with me further, you can connect with me in LinkedIn. So that's me, right, in LinkedIn, and my email is there as well. So I'm going to pass the time back to Joel for us to field some questions you might have around games and also leadership.
All right, thank you so much for that, Andrew. That is truly a very informative talk. Yeah, I know it's brief, but yeah, we'd like to open to questions and you know, to get a little bit more feel about what Andrew just talked about. So as I mentioned earlier, if you've got any questions, do drop them into the chat. You know, we can at least see it in real time and try and answer it. But if not, you can drop it in the link on screen, tiny.cc/askwater, and you can put a little bit more details there. You can drop your contact details as well, so that we can get back to you, get in touch with you as well. Okay, just based on what you've shared earlier, I've got a bunch of questions here. You know, you talked earlier on about this. You talked about building a strong why. So how, or doing things because of the why. So how do we build a strong why into our journey? You know, so that we are very focused, we are very sure of what we're doing, and you know, we just don't you know, shoot in the dark kind of thing. Yeah, how do we build a strong why that will help us on this journey?
Okay, thanks, Joel, for the question. So a strong why is very closely related to who you are, right? So your why cannot be something that you see, oh, I want to be like Steve Jobs, I want to be like Elon Musk, I want to be like this religious leader, I want to be like this political leader, because you're not them. And if you're going to base your why on that, then it's going to be an issue, right? So understanding who you are will be one of the most important things, right? So we spend a lot of money, right, on food and stuff like that, on fashion, on technology, right? I know a lot of us spend a lot on technology, phones and stuff like that. But let me encourage us to spend a bit of money on self-assessments. Right, there are a lot of good self-assessment tools out there. Right, spend some money. Some of them are not too expensive, 40 ringgit, 50 ringgit. Yeah, but spend those. Don't do those that are in Facebook. Don't do those that are like, you know, what type of plant are you? You know, are you a durian? You know, those type of things. Those don't work because all they're interested in is for you to post it so that they get more views, right? Those type of things, right? Yeah. So that's one of it. The other thing I think to build your why is to understand what motivates you. So you can ask. Basically, I ask myself, or I ask people who join the my team, two questions. You know, what keeps you up at night? Hopefully, it's not the movie that you just saw, right? And what gets you up in the morning, right? And it goes beyond passion. Because it's not just because you like something. Now, just because I like music doesn't mean I can make a career out of playing guitar. It's totally two different things, right? But you need to understand what you really want and you're willing to sacrifice for. All right. So what really keeps you up at night, and what gets you up in the morning, day after day after day, and somewhere in between you find your why. Yeah.
Oops. Thanks for that, Andrew. Yeah, doing some assessments. So actually, while we're on the topic of assessments, earlier you mentioned you know, we should learn our strengths and gaps, and now you're bringing up this thing about assessments. So would you recommend any type of assessment that we could do, or you know, some of the, yeah, you already mentioned don't do the Facebook ones, but what are some of the recommended ones that you would say? Well, for example, I've heard of like Gallup, but I know it's not cheap, you know. So so would you know any others that are something like that you can suggest to our viewers?
Sure. So if you're starting your leadership journey, all right, or you're unsure, start off with understanding yourself from a character perspective, right? So things like Myers-Briggs type of MBTI assessments, those are really good. or DISC. So am I dominant? Am I introvert, extrovert? So those type of things. Understand yourself a bit more from a character, basic character type of level. Who do you work well with, who you don't? And then if you understand a bit more of this, they call them the big four in psychology. If you understand a bit more of this already, then I would recommend, like what you mentioned from Gallup, they have this thing called Strengths Finder. It's a really good assessment. It's about 64 types of, if I'm not mistaken, 36 or 64 types of strengths, and then you find your top 5 strengths, what you're good at, because if you want to build your leadership journey, it should be based on your strengths, not on your weaknesses. You will manage your weaknesses, but you will build your leadership journey on your strength. So the same with an organization. When we talk about strategy, business strategy, you don't build your business strategy on something you're not good at. You build your business strategy on things that you're really good at, right? So the same way in your leadership journey. Now, if it's a bit more personal or religious in nature, there's this thing called your gifting with God. There's this thing called finding your fit, right? So that's also a really good one if you want to explore a bit more of your spiritual side. And yeah, but there are a lot of them out there, but these are the ones I find that are not too expensive and they're pretty good themselves. And I always advocate, try to find and invest yourself in the paid ones. And I mean, sometimes if we go to Hai Di Lao steamboat, that's already more than 2 assessments, right? So skip that meal, cook your own steamboat at home and invest yourself. Because the leadership journey that you're going to be in is not the responsibility of the company, right? It's not your wife's responsibility, it's not husband's responsibility, it's not your religious leader's responsibility. It's your responsibility at the end of the day to take charge of it. And invest in self-assessment. Because if you want to know where you want to go, you also need to understand where you are. Because if you don't understand where you are, you can never plot where you want to go. If you think you're here, you start moving from here, but actually you're here, you're going to find yourself getting stuck halfway. And then you go around in circles and circles and you don't understand why. So that's why it's important to know where you are. It's what I call a GPS principle, right? You know where you want to go, you know where you are. Else the GPS is not going to build that track towards that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Andrew. Yeah, the GPS principle. I like what you said earlier. Manage your weaknesses, but build on your strengths. And the leadership journey is your responsibility. I think it's something for us to remember, because I think a lot of us try to cover our weaknesses, but show our strengths. But the way you put it is very different. Yeah, and I think it's something for us to learn. I've got some more detailed questions. Why don't I just read this out so that I get all the content well. So, in games, you always have some of the weaker players who tend to pull the team down, either because they're not focused, they're not motivated. But if you take that into the workplace, there are similar cases as well. In the game, they'll end up losing, they'll just die and then respawn or something. But the fittest will survive. At the workplace, these people who are pulling the team down, they still stick around. How do we encourage them or motivate them to pick up up their game and pick up their slack, basically?
Sure. So when we talk about people who are not performing, right? And when I say performing, I'm going to use inverted commas because that's very subjective, right? More often than not, it's a few issues, a few key issues. Firstly, it could be a capability issue. They're not capable, right? So then that's where you need to identify that if it's capability issue, then you send them for training, or you put them on job shadowing or such. Or if really they can't do this job, they don't have an analytical mind, and you want them to do big data, that's not going to work, right? So that's a capability issue, right? Second one, it could be what we call capacity issue. They can do the job, but they can't take the pressure or they can't take the workload, right? So this is a capacity issue. So this one, you got to work with it. And this one, I think we need to be more understanding. Just because I can work 16 hours a day, I cannot expect others to do 16 hours a day. I remember when I was doing programming, when I was in computer science. So my degree is in computer science. I my friends who can program C++ language, in 2 hours. It took me 2 days to do it, right? So this problem is a problem of a bit of capability, but a lot of capacity type of issue, right? So if I need 2 days, then you got to give me 2 days. If you can't, then you got to do this with me. So third one could be a confidence issue, right? They're not confident, right? So this, you need to sit down and talk with them. Why? You need to understand why. And at the end of the day, I think we need to be empathic, and we need to know that there's another human being there. All right, don't know the person just because of their role. Know the person because of who they are, right? Often in organizations, it's very easy. You talk to someone because you need something from them for their role, right? And I think we need to understand their why. And when we try to understand the why, obviously sometimes you might find that this is not what they want to do, or maybe they don't want to go so high up in the organization. And then we cannot push our expectation of what success means to them. Because for them, maybe they're fine with this level. They want to have more time with their family. They don't want to go up to the regional level or global level. And we cannot look at them as lesser colleagues in the organization. So we need to understand, and a leader will be able to see these things and understand these things. But far beyond anything, talk to the people. Are there people who are just difficult for being the sake of being difficult? Yes, but there usually is an underlying reason. So I mean, Joel, you and myself, we don't wake up in the morning and say, all right, let's try to be difficult to whoever that we meet today. Most humans don't behave like that. There's always an underlying reason, some life incidents or situations. So as leaders, we need to find out this before we pass judgment. And it's not something that's easy to do. And I'm guilty of, sometimes being too results focused and too little human focus in that sense. And if it's a team sport, no matter how good you are, if you're playing a multiplayer game, if you have a lot of your players, they are dead right in the game, you're coming against a lot of players. I don't care how good your skill you are, you're gonna die as well. You can't go the distance, because that's not going to happen, right? Sometimes the numbers help, even though no matter how skilled you are as an individual, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, yeah, Andrew. Yeah, I like what you just said. We cannot push success to what that means to you. We need to talk to them, and yeah, nobody wants to be difficult just for the sake of being difficult. Yeah, I think that's true. So I guess that's Clement, for you asked that question. It's something for you to think about. The best is to have a conversation and to understand what success means to this person, so that you can best understand their needs as well. All right, I've got another very specific question. Okay, so I think this relates to the various generations. So, in a typical Chinaman or traditional family business, most of the leaders are Gen X or baby boomers, in that age group. They've built up the business over the years, and they've used certain methods and ways that work, and they are quite stuck in those ways of doing things, and they're also not willing to adapt to technology, not willing to adapt to changes. So how can some of us here who are Gen Y leaders open up and begin this conversation to people who are founders, people who are entrepreneurs in their own right, but are much older, and overcome this obstacle, and in order to move the company to the next level, and maybe just for the season that we're in. I think because of COVID-19, a lot of things are going online, and actually a lot of companies can't survive unless they have an online component. So yeah, how can we begin this conversation with these bosses who started the company years ago?
Sure. So I think one of the lessons I learned early on in my career was I didn't necessarily have bosses which were good all the time. So are there going to be times when our bosses are not as good at us as us? Yeah, most definitely. It doesn't mean by default your boss needs to be better than you. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, in real life, right? But we need to acknowledge, and this way I learned, we need to acknowledge that they are there. they are there as a reason, and you're here as a reason, right? They are there and you're down here, right? And you need to respect them, right? Of course, they may be outdated and things like that, but that's where I think if we come with that type of mindset, we're not trying to teach them or show them how it's really done in the real world now, in this digital age. It helps to soften the blow when we talk to them, because people can see your motive when you talk to them, right? Leaders can also see, I mean, they've been around with a lot of people. I mean, if they've been leading companies for 30, 40 years, they'll see straight away why you're trying to push over some change, right? So those are things. And secondly, I think often you would find that if you cannot connect with them at a personal level, it's only because, that's why I say, you all talk at the level of understand when you all need things from each other, right? You don't get to know the person, right? And you find that finding some opportunities, especially like in non-formal environments, if the company has an open house or makan together, those are things, the leaders guard will be down, right? And you'll be able to access them. Sometimes you don't even get a chance to get past the secretary, right? They're so busy. Folks find these type of environments. The other thing that I can recommend is find those that they listen to, and then talk to those people. Find out, why do this big boss listen to you and not other people? And you find out that they'll tell you that, oh, actually, with this guy, you've got to go with very high level thinking, right? Or with this guy, you would go with charts. You could go without charts, you're going to get scolded and, sent back to your cubicle and such. So find out who they work best with, and try to find how to work with them. And I think at the end of the day, none of those leaders want to run down the company, wants their legacy to be, oh, I'm the guy that killed off the company. I don't think any of them want to be, but it's not that they fear change, right? Humans, we don't fear change. We fear the pain or the uncertainty that the change would bring. Who's to say if I subscribe to this system, who's to say if I go everything online, it's not going to be worse? What if the revenue drops? So have we ever sit from their point of view and asked that question? Maybe because they've got something that's proven, right? So I mean, for example, all of us, tomorrow there's we've got flying cars. Are we going to sit and start using flying cars? We'll be like, hey, what's the statistics like? Do people know how to use it, right? So we need to see from that. So the whole uncertainty. So you need to understand what are those uncertainties, address it, right? And make sure when you approach it, you have addressed it. If this, let's do a pilot so that the issue will not be overblown and you'll not affect revenue. Those are things, right? And then secondly, pain of change, right? They may be a bit embarrassed that they might not know some of this technological stuff. So you're not there to teach them, right? You're there to journey together with them. So that's why I say motive is very important, especially when you talk to leaders or when you talk with your peers or people under you as well. People can see right through you sometimes when your motive is not right. You may say the right things, but when people look at your body expression, the way you verse certain things, people just know, you just want them out of the way, because they are in the way of progress, right? So yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, based on my own experiences of dealing with leaders, I had a few leaders who were admittedly not as good as me in certain areas. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it's a lot of things that people have, the fear of the pain that the change will bring. And I think specific to this question, people in the older generation are probably embarrassed that they don't know this technology, and I think it's up to us to kind of explain to them, and at the same time have a runway to kind of test what we are saying as well. But as always, have a conversation. Communicate with them.
Sorry,
there's a couple.
I just want to. Sorry, Joel.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to mention, there is no better generation here. Yeah, there'll always be people better than you, and we need to acknowledge that some people are better as one. I mean, if we say that we're better at technology as young people, so I'm somewhere in between, right? I'm kind of young, right? Not that old, but not that young either. There's no better generation. if I were to bring a very young person who thinks that they know everything, I'm going to put them up in a leadership position and let them lead a company that's, I don't know, 10, 50 million. I can guarantee you they're going to fail miserably, right? Or, I'm going to get the very senior person, ask him to do online chatbot, all those sort of things. They're going to find it very difficult. So we need each other, right? There's this whole concept of what I call a whole team, WHOLE, whole team, right? A whole person, a bit hard to find, but there's a whole team. So we need to complement each other. So we cannot go into this whole conversation of like, the baby boomers, they're outdated and they can't work or whatever it is. And I really resent, although I'm not from the boomer generation, I don't like this term called that people like to use, okay boomer, right? I feel it's disrespect, and just because you don't know how to argue, you use this whole okay boomer, because if we don't have that type of level of respect in organizations, then you're gonna have trouble. So there's no like I'm better because I'm from this generation. We need to take away that thing. If not, then we're going to find ourselves in trouble, whether you're from the older generation or you're from the younger generation. I just want to put that out there, because there seems to be a lot of this divisions between the young people and the older people. Yeah, older people are slow, stubborn, those sort of things. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. I literally had to Google okay boomer, but yeah, something for us all to learn. So yeah, I just found out what it was. Yeah, but I guess what you're saying, at the end of the day, have honor and respect across the generations. There's no one that is better or more important than the other. We're all needed together. That thing you said about it's a whole team, right? Yeah. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat group. I think it's around the similar things. One is asking, do you have any other game suggestions that will be good for us in terms of learning, different motor skills, leadership, and analytical thinking, things like that? Are there any specific games that you would suggest? Or game methodology?
Okay. Within the corporate sphere, there's this whole thing called serious games, and that's where we come from. And serious games, where the games are developed not for the sole purpose of entertainment. Now, if you ask me whether in App Store or in you go to those board game shops, are you able to learn things, leadership, analytical thinking? Somewhat, a bit here and there, but we need to understand that those are games designed for entertainment, and they do a good job at it, right? So if it's not designed for learning, then it's going to be very hard to find those in App Store and things like that. So take them for what it is. If at a corporate level, then usually these were corporations or learning organizations or learning gamification organizations. Myself, this is where we come in. We got games for the purpose of learning, where the game part of it takes a second seat, and the most important thing is learning the competency and the skill sets. Yeah.
Mm.
So
okay,
unfortunately, I don't have suggestions outside in the open market. Yeah, because it's not designed for learning as per se. It's more for entertainment.
Yeah. So you probably need to go and get serious games, and if not, get in touch with Andrew. He dropped his contact details there. So if there is a specific skill that you want to learn, and to help your organization, I guess get in touch with people who are into this area of serious games, so that you can get the specific skill that you need. There's another question from Terry. So there are a lot of leadership courses out there. So would you suggest or recommend any, especially for the middle management people? So in order to improve them, to encourage them, is there any suggestions that you have?
Okay, so from a middle management perspective, so based on our observation, we work with a lot of Fortune 500 MNCs and large GLCs. Those are our client base generally. So from a middle management perspective, at a cognitive level, you should be looking at strategic thinking type of type of courses, right? Thinking strategy. I mean, problem solving, that should be already below you, because you should have already learned how to do all those things. From a business perspective, you need to understand business acumen, right? How businesses work, right? A bit of financial acumen, resource acumen, human resource acumen. So you need, at this level, you need to do breadth, because if you go up the next level at senior leadership, often already at middle level, you are in charge of what we call P&L, profit and loss. So you need to understand all these things, right? So this is where you need to develop breadth already. And from a business perspective, business acumen needs to be learned here. Now, from a people perspective, you need to learn how to develop what we call high performance teams, right? So not just leading teams, that's the minimum requirement. How to lead high performance teams, and you'll soon find out that it's not really about you, it's about you, how you enable your people, right? And all your people are not going to be all the same mold. They're going to be very, very different people. How do you get the best performance out of them, right? As a leader, right? And then I think the last part is from the leadership part of things. I think you need to learn how to be at this level, what we call, let me see, okay, slip my mind a bit, but just a step below transformative leaders, you need to be, I think, a systemic leader, be able to create change at a systemic level. So not processes, not resource, but as a systemic leader, right? So transformative leader is at the highest level, right? Transform the whole industry as per se, leading the industry, not just leading your company. Yeah.
Okay, so it is. I mean, transformative is the highest level, but this is probably something that you can look into. So I guess for Terry, it will be something a little bit lower before transformative leadership. So that's probably a systemic leadership. So that kind of courses that you can do, and the other part is to develop high performance teams as well. Yeah. Okay, there's another question here. Yeah, okay, this person says it's a bit lengthy, but maybe you can try and answer it in the best way possible. Is there a school of thought or a field that looks at applying game mechanics in real life? So I think this is probably something like the reverse of gamification. So it's not just about drawing parallels, but looking at how the game unfolds and to make sense of real world circumstances. So this person asks, gives an example in Dota. There is a particular hero that needs to carry some toxic weight. But for us or someone working in an organization, they probably need to carry a heavy, maybe toxic weight for the sake of keeping that organization afloat. And how do you draw that lines, and how do you is there a group that does this type of gamification, if any?
Yeah, so I think at the organizational level, there is gamification is a bit deeper than that. So what you're mentioning are very situational in nature, but there are basic frameworks and principles behind it. So for example, if you think about it, the whole organization is what we call accomplishment based, right? In games, you go up levels, you amateurs, amateur wizard, senior wizard, those type of things. Think about it. That's how our job titles are. So why do we even need job titles, right? Why do we go up job rankings and stuff like it's the same, right? To a certain extent. In terms of carrying toxic weights and everything, I think those falls under roles and responsibilities, whether formal or informal, right? I don't think people put their formal job description is carry toxicity or toxicity of the organization. So I'd be happy to chat more to understand a bit more. But yeah, I probably wouldn't be able to do it due to the 20 minutes given today. Yeah.
So I guess Mandeep, you can drop your question to Andrew, and I'm sure he'll be glad to answer it. Yeah, okay, that's the email. Andrew has just dropped it in. Andrew Lau at thinkcodex.com. Okay, all right, thanks, Mandeep. Okay, there's a question here. Do you recommend any validated personality tests or leadership style tests for performance improvement? How effective are these tests in practical? So I guess it's a recommendation on more of leadership style tests. So just now we talked about personality tests, we talked about strengths tests, but now it's specifically a leadership test style test. So are there any that you would recommend?
So when we talk about leadership and performance improvement, you do assessments to find out gaps and also positioning. Assessments itself cannot give you performance improvement. The steps that you take after assessments is what we call performance improvement, right? There are different. There are really a lot of tests out there. Some of them really expensive, like Wave. It costs you a few thousand per person. It's really expensive. I would begin by understanding who you are as a leader based on the competency model within your organization. So assuming you belong to an organization, so your organization have certain competency levels, so you can also gauge, right? Strength finders, once again, is a good and a simple one. However, for leadership, I tend to recommend not a self-assessed test, because it's very hard to assess who you are as a leader. Sometimes it's a lot of what people say you are as a leader, right? We tend to use a lot of simulations, right? Simulate an environment, put them in that situation, and then let them play it out, and then observe how they deal with people, deal with situations, deal with crises, deal with various facets. And that's where you can test them for their performance. And a lot of leadership skill sets, a lot of management skill sets are caught rather than taught, right? So self-assessment is not going to help that much. Because if you're a leader of a certain level, you know how to ace this test anyhow, right? You might not need to be naturally honest. And if this is who you are, if this is who you say you are, what's the test to say that you're not going to be? So when it comes to leadership, we'll always do simulated environments, because that's where you can that's the area of expertise that we deal with. We run a lot of leadership simulations and assessments for senior, middle managers, and also, let's say, management trainees. You could reach out to me offline.
All right. Thanks, Grace, for that question, and thanks, Andrew, for answering it. So it looks like it's doing a simulated environment, so I like this phrase, lot more is caught than is taught, right? So it's something that you want to put your leaders into. We are running out of time, but maybe, Andrew, I'll just leave you to say your last few words, and then we will come to a close.
I think when we talk about leadership, none of us have got it figured out, right? There's no straight path. Myself, we deal with a lot of organizations. Even myself, I had a lot of what we call wilderness experience. First step, always get to know yourself better, right? Self-test, self-assessments at this level be good. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your colleagues. Who do they think you are? And don't take the word of one person. Get a lot of people and look for trends and patterns, right? Because else is just from one person's lens, and then you base your whole leadership journey based on that. That person says I'm a bad listener, right? So, but is it true? What do the rest say, right? So that whole part, and then take the next step, right? And there is both a science and art to it. Of course, we want the nice, the straight path. Often it's not there. There are a lot of resources available. A lot of them are free for those who can't afford it. So I'm not saying the free ones are totally useless, but obviously if you have to pay, then there's a bit more value, right? So go for those. So understand more about yourself, and then just go for it, right? And be the best player that you can, right? In this whole game of leadership.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for leaving us with that. be the best player that you can in this game of leadership. All right, and with that, why don't we just thank Andrew? Why don't we appreciate him? What we can give him a virtual clap. Yeah, thank him for speaking. Yeah, you can drop your comments and your appreciation in the chat as well. Thanks for taking your time with us, Andrew. It's been truly a pleasure hosting you. It's very exciting, very engaging. You must have a lot of fun doing what you do. Yeah. But thanks for taking your time to be with us. So before we close, let me just remind us that next week we will also have our Biz Talks as. More details will be coming soon. So just go ahead and sign up tomorrow. The link will be ready. We're just finalizing some details, and then we will get the link up to you tomorrow. So do sign up as soon as you can. I'll drop you a hint. Next week, we're talking about renewable energy and how you can be sustainable in business. All right. So something very interesting that I've heard recently as well. So do sign up at the link. Also, if you'd like to connect with us, the team here at Workplace at the River, drop your name or your contact details at the link, tiny.cc/waterconnect. This is like leaving your business card at the end of a networking event. So yeah, go ahead, get in touch with us. Yeah, we'd like to kind of get to know you as well. And I understand that our viewers are from very vast industries, right? So, if we can get your contacts, we can probably group the various industries together and allow some networking to go. And I know it's a lot different online, being on this Zoom platform, but we'll do our best. And it all starts with connecting. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. We're a couple of minutes over 8. Thank you for taking your time to be with us. Thank you for engaging with us this evening. My name is Joel. I'm part of the team at Workplace at the River, and it's been my pleasure to host you this evening. See you again next week. Bye.
Bye.